Glenn Gould may be one of the most disliked of all the famous piano players. And when I say disliked, I'm not talking about his actions or his opinions, but simply disliked by the way he played the piano. I mean, if you put his name into YouTube, you see three primary types of videos: his performances, people talking about the interesting things he had to say, like, I don't want to play a piece like anyone else played a piece before. I want to invent something new, the fascinating things he had to say. And the third type of videos, which are making fun of him, which is honestly pretty easy to do, from the way he sat, from his fairly awkward technique, to the way he sang and literally conducted himself while playing the piano. But this is not going to be yet another video where I just pile on all the obviously awkward things that Glenn Gould did, but I want to try to answer a way more interesting question. Why is he so popular? I said earlier, when you search for his name, you're going to see people making fun of the way he played, talking about interesting things he had to say, and his performances. Well, what about those performances? They are really popular, and I've even seen, as I put out videos, people make fun of Glenn Gould so much in the comment section, but also there's a very large contingency of people who just love him. Like, my favorite recording of X piece is Gould's. He has a huge fan base, so what are people finding in Gould that most people are missing? To help answer that question, I want to introduce to you something I have created, which I have called the flexibility meter. For really lack of a better name, I cannot think of a better word for this, but what I want to show by this is that sometimes you can play a piece fairly rigidly, fairly strict, which is going to be on the left side here, and sometimes you can play a piece with quite a bit of flexibility. But what I want to help you visualize this meter is that some pieces fall more on the left side, more in the strict, stringent, or you could say straightforward category. Think like the first movement of a Mozart sonata, where you're not really going to be rushing and slowing down all the time. But many pieces fall more on the right side, where it would be pretty ridiculous to play them completely straightforward. You need quite a bit of rhythmic flexibility to pull them off. Think Chopin and the Romantics. But the interesting thing here is, who gets to decide where on my meter these pieces fall? Sometimes it's stylistic, but who gets to make the final judgment call? The performer, the interpreter of the piece. And you probably have experienced this even if you didn't know it. Perhaps you've heard a version of Bach's Prelude in C major like this, where it was fairly strict, the tempo all the way through. And maybe you've heard a version where someone plays So here's where we get to Gould and the first main point of the video. He loves to interpret classical music way more on the strict side than most piano players do. He will take a piece that almost everybody has more flexibility, and he will play it so straightforward. I'm going to show you a piano solo example of this here in just a little bit, but I want to start out with the most fun one, the Emperor Concerto. Check out this page here. Even if you can barely read music, one thing you should notice here is that the right hand Beethoven wrote goes completely crazy. There's like triplets, and then 4, and then 7s, and there's 6s, and there's 5s, followed by more 4s. But most piano players, when they're interpreting this page, play it something like this. Now be honest, if I hadn't shown you the score first, you would have no clue that Beethoven wrote all these different subdivisions with 5s and 4s and 7s and 6s and 3s, right? It's all over the place on the score, but when you hear it, it sounds very free and flexible because this interpretation is way more on the flexible side of the flexibility meter. Now I've made you wait long enough, let's listen to how Glenn does it. Isn't that so cool? And also really informative for the way Beethoven actually wrote it. Gould was like, what about if it says 6 and I play 6? And then when it says 7, I'll play 7. Then when it says 4, I'll play 4. You can hear the structure of the piece a lot better because the tempo is not changing all over the place. And this leads me to a super important point that I want to make partway through the video. Being on the left or on the right side of the flexibility scale is not necessarily good or bad. Yes, we can probably all agree there are certain styles that work better, more strict, and certain styles that work better, less strict. But you can't say the further right you go or the further left you go, it is inherently better. It all depends on that piece, that performer, that interpretation, and how they pull it off. Just to prove this point, I too decided to record a version of this page of the Emperor Concerto, and I'm going to go the opposite direction of Gould. I'm going to go like, hey, Gould was too strict for some people. These people were flexible. I'm going to go even more flexible. It's got to make it better, right? Now, you could argue that that isn't the best example because it is a piano concerto, piano and orchestra working together, and also he famously had like basically no warning and just showed up and played with the orchestra. But just to show you, here's an example from solo piano literature. Now, I'm not going to show you an example from Bach because I feel like it's fairly accepted that he plays Bach well. People say, Gould sucks, I hate Glenn Gould. And someone says, what about Goldberg variations? Well, not counting the Goldberg variations, he's great at Bach, but he's terrible at everything else, right? So we're not going to look at that. Here is Wilhelm Kempff playing the first movement of Pathétique, getting into the second section in E flat minor. He plays it so different than the first section, really calms it down a little bit, slows the tempo down, thickens it up, and makes it sound more dark and mysterious, whereas Gould just plays pretty much right into it. Also, a little bit later, we get this big scale here. You can hear how Kempff really took his time at the beginning of the scale to kind of get it going. But of course, as you probably guessed by this point, Gould will basically take no time at all playing it. But besides tempo flexibility, there is another huge defining aspect of Glenn Gould's playing that I think you really have to understand to know what sets him apart, and that's his love of bringing out things that you don't expect to be brought out. And you can basically listen to anything he records to find out what I'm talking about. He will have a clear melody and say, well, everyone brings out that melody. Why don't I bring out something different? To show you this, let's check out actually the third movement of Pathétique. Here is Zimmerman playing the B section. Oh, that's fun. Some fast kind of light scales on top. Here's Kempff doing the same thing. But Gould asks a different question. What if I just randomly pop some left-hand notes in there? You can also really hear this happening in that Emperor Concerto section I showed you earlier. He plays some of those left-hand notes so loud to show you that there's a little line going on there in the middle. And I think if you take those two things together, what you get is a lot of understanding sometimes of what the composer is doing. Let me explain. If you're playing Beethoven and you interpret it with so much tempo flexibility, at a certain point, you begin to lose track of like the driving punch of the piece. You begin to lose track of where some of those big moments are because everything is just too wishy-washy. Also, there's tons of classical music that really hinges on super cool harmony. And if you were to go extreme and play like 90% melody and only 10% harmony, you might miss out on some of the cool stuff that's happening down there. So what I think some people love so much about Gould is those two elements are so clear, so much at the forefront when he plays, you sometimes feel like you understand what the composer's trying to do. Now, I want to keep this video mostly focused on the positive things of Glenn Gould, but I will mention one of the reasons why he's not my personal favorite piano player is because sometimes he does these crazy tempos, brings out different lines, plays everything staccato, and the opposite kind of happens. You lose track of what the composer was trying to do in the first place. It's kind of become its own kind of Glenn Gould composition, right? So I'm not saying this always happens where you listen to a piece of music by Glenn Gould and you're like, I feel like I'm hearing Beethoven speak for the first time. I just don't want you guys to feel like I'm misleading you. Like make a whole video like Glenn Gould is the best piano player ever. I love him. And the next week be like, oh yeah, I don't listen to Glenn Gould much. I just said that for views. Like I want to be honest and be like, there's some super cool things about him. Like when I listen to the Emperor Concerto, a piece I played, I hear things I've never considered before, which is a really cool experience when you played a piece to hear someone play it and you go, oh, I never thought about that subdivision. I never thought about that drive there. I never thought about that progression because he brought out something I didn't bring out. That's a cool experience. But yes, at the same time, there are reasons he's not my favorite. But again, there are already a plethora of videos out there. If you want to watch something that makes fun of the way he plays or the way he interprets stuff, that already exists. I want to do something a little different and maybe a little more challenging in this video, which is try to figure out, yes, despite all that, why is he so insanely popular? And hopefully I helped you understand a little better than you did before. See you guys.